Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the family. TrineDay Treasures. Here is interview number 2 with my buddy Mark Harris. He is the author of Houses of the Holy, a nightmare web of hate, crime, corruption, and child abuse. Mark is currently an instructor of corporate pilots around the world for a large corporation. He is also an FAA examiner, granted the privilege to issue licenses and type ratings, and teaches several safety-related specialty courses. He has a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of North Georgia, where he graduated magna cum laude as the top physics graduate, and a master's degree in aeronautical engineering technology from Arizona State University, where he calibrated the university's wind tunnel. He is a decorated former Air Force Special Operations pilot who served in combat zones. Mark, welcome.
Thank you for having me back.
Yes, and me and Chris, when I was hosting the journey, did an interview with you already. But of course, I wanted to keep this channel going and do more TrineDay author interviews. I'm doing this little TrineDay Treasures segment or channel. And I have read, for the audience, I have read this. This is an amazing book. Kind of like what you call that you ever watch Trailer Park Boys, where they're always saying, "Oh, this is a horror show." Yeah, I mean this is something else. What a nightmare ride you had going on. But yeah, it was a great book. It read very well. I left you the Amazon review and stuff, and
Appreciate that. Yeah.
yeah, this was. It may look big, but it was a very easy read. And you definitely wanted to keep reading it, um, even though the story itself was not very friendly, but to you
Yeah,
more.
pretty
Yeah,
well, even more so to the child
yeah,
victim of the story.
exactly.
I
So
talked to Lois Lee recently. Are you familiar with her? She's saved thousands and thousands of children. Um,
what's her name?
Lois Lee,
No, I'm not
she's
familiar
out
with
in
it.
California, but
Oh, it's
anyway,
it's a man.
no, it's a woman. No, it's a
It's a
woman.
woman.
Huh?
Oh, it's a
Anyhow,
woman. Yeah.
she pointed out, we reference child abuse in the title there on the cover, but what we're talking about is actually violent child rape,
Yeah. Oh,
human
like
trafficking,
horrifying, horrifying.
children exploited in child pornography, children
Yeah.
prostituted to grown men. That's what we're talking about. So instead of
Yeah.
we don't want to tap dance around that anymore. We're talking about the rape and torture of children. So
Yes, absolutely. And it's horrifying. I mean, you've got pictures in here, especially with these wands this guy's selling. Really, really sick.
yeah,
Um,
and okay, so people get, it's easy to jump on, oh, conspiracy theory,
mm,
when your child makes a very, both your children, vivid,
yeah,
graphic, detailed description of being raped with, an implement, and they draw it and it's a magic wand. Then you find out after the fact, the order is important. After the fact, you discover that one of the perpetrators they identified, their grandfather's brother, actually makes the implements and sells them on the internet. And by the way, is a fan of people like Aleister Crowley and collects spell books and witchcraft books and so forth. Well, it's kind of hard to explain that away. But they
yeah,
always have a way of explaining it away was you're crazy, you're delusional, gaslighting,
mm,
Darvo and I attack, reverse the victim and offender, and they're very, very clever at that. And I dealt with that for years. So
yeah. And so the audience, this is a very well backed up book. A lot of documents in the back, basically showing all of the stuff that happened as he's talking about it. And yeah, it is. Yeah, because children, when they get into that level of detail about something so twisted, it's kind of like, I don't know. It just seems like how would they think that up on their own? You know what I mean? You can't just
well, Yeah, I was just talking to my oldest son this afternoon earlier, checking on him. We all have pneumonia. We're getting over it, but appreciate you letting me delay this to where I had,
Yeah, anytime. I
get through
mean,
without coughing
I'm
my
very
lungs out too much. So, but even he pointed out, we're talking about the pictures he drew when he was 7 years old. He was drawing statues of Anubis, god of the dead, and
yep, yep.
heads and magic wands and Ouroboros and uh, a sword
Yeah.
with a skull on the handle, an altar.
Mm-hmm.
Me and you just figured out recently one of these symbols he drew when he was 7 years old uh, is
Was it the
a
demon seal?
lesser key of Solomon, and it
Yeah.
almost perfectly matches
Yeah.
symbol for Baal, Baal worship.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's actually
but
for
anyway, he pointed out he didn't know who Anubis was. He
yeah.
had never seen Anubis except for what he saw in this little Knight Templar temple, basically underground in his grandfather's house,
Yeah.
built by a Knight Templar leader, numbered 1118 for the year the Knights Templar were founded, built the same year his grandfather entered into corporations with names like Androgynous, Alchemy, Pellucid,
Mm-hmm.
Tabula Rasa,
Mm.
Prescience, Augury, all stuff associated with Solamic witchcraft, Knight Templar, Voodoo. I mean, they literally named about half a dozen corporations after Baphomet. Androgynous and androgyny,
Yes. Yeah,
androgyny.
yeah.
The androgynous god is Baphomet.
Mm.
You can't make this stuff up. You know, you read my bio. I'm a scientist. I had a hard time wrapping around
Of
my
course.
brain that this stuff was really real. But the problem is, I know my kids really experienced this. They didn't make this
Mm-hmm.
up. And there's hundreds of data points that support their claims.
Yeah,
Um,
and then not only
if you look
that,
at the
but it
order of events and the order those data points were gathered, it makes it impossible to be some made up story or conspiracy theory.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just it's shocking because it was for the audience is like so you got involved with somebody and raised these children and they started the father-in-law starts abusing them and he was a member of these Freemasonic groups and
Well, he was actually a leader in the Church of Christ, hiding
okay,
behind
yeah,
religion, along with all of his other partners in crime and business associates involved in all these creepy name corporations, all elders, deacons in the Church of Christ.
yeah,
And
so you
and, that,
and
and that's
you were a
yeah,
member and
yeah, because I
you were
married
kind
into.
of do you want to kind of go over like how it all started or do you,
Well, I
like
mean,
you
just summary. I married the man's daughter, and the marriage was disastrous because she had
mhm.
symptoms of, dissociative identity disorder, borderline personality disorder, complex post-traumatic stress disorder,
Yeah.
and at least a dozen affairs, all these crazy, distorted thought processes, and then, my efforts to help her, I read some stuff she'd been writing over the years, journals she'd been
Yeah.
keeping, and she's writing about crucifixion, burning, sacrifices, locked in a cage, trapped in a hole, being told stories about her grandfather of the phoenix rising from the ashes, another, Masonic, Egyptian stuff, and writing about infanticide, about killing children and burying them, talking about
Yeah.
going out and digging another hole and pretending
Hmm.
to have a miscarriage. Now, she didn't say a hole, she said another hole, which, and I know my son was forced by his grandfather to help him dig a hole and bury a man that he murdered in his backyard, which he
Yeah.
later dug up and took out and hung from a tree and burned. We found the tree.
Hmm.
And here's something that's not in the book. I just discovered this recently. This site where this lynching, this occultish lynching occurred, where there were magic circles dug around the base of the tree. Excuse me. Um, it precisely matches the location described in a newspaper article of property that used to be owned by the Crestview Masonic Lodge, Crestview, Florida
Hmm.
Masonic Lodge for outdoor rituals.
Hmm.
They described, and just near this site, there's an Interstate 10 bridge, and under that bridge were all sorts of occult symbols, a huge ram's head painted on the side of the on the wall there, upside down black crosses, and a depiction of a lynching, the N word, and all this, hate occultish type
Wow.
stuff right there, just within maybe a mile or less of this tree that we found. And of course, what we get met there with Eglin Air Force Base Range Patrol, OSI, Office of Special Investigations, Walton County Sheriff's Department. They take pictures of it. They mark the perimeter around it, put surveyor's tape marking the tree and everything, and then turn around and say it wasn't there and try to frame me and put me in prison. But that's how
Yeah.
every step of the way was the same thing. It was with the
Yeah. And
sexual,
that's one, there's
with
one thing in the book that was just amazing how you got to get help over and over, and they just keep shutting it down, shutting it down. And then you would have the same judge
yeah,
rule over all of your cases. And it
and
was
and
like,
and, and even at one point told in advance by an attorney that I was set up with by George W. Bush's former attorney, which wasn't a coincidence. Tell
okay.
me, in advance that the case is going to be transferred to her former boss, Judge
Hmm.
Santuri. So how did she know that? And it ended up being transferred to her former boss. But the point of that is the fix was in from the start, and that happened over and over and over again. And guess what? Judge Santuri's wife was a staffer for Congressman Jeff Miller,
Hmm.
another redneck, ultra right winger Freemason congressman who was holding uh, the position he had. Jeff Miller had at that time was the same position as former Congressman Bob Sykes. Uh, I just
Hmm.
found this the other day. This is a
Yeah.
declassified CIA document. Um,
Ooh.
uh, Bob Sykes was responsible for the funding for Eglin Air Force Base, and this cult, this right wing Knight Templar cult. There's tons of data points that connect it to the military and to Eglin Air Force Base. So
Hmm.
Bob Sykes was former OSS, Office of Special Services, the predecessor of the CIA,
Yep. Yep.
attached to the Psychological Warfare Department,
Hmm.
and he was 33rd degree Mason, Knights Templar,
Yep.
uh, and so um, that lodge that he was a member of in Crestview. Oh, Bob Sykes, by the way, was a vile, racist, segregationist thief. Got his
Yeah.
caught in the government cookie jar. He's named after Robert E. Lee. His father was a Confederate soldier. He was at 33 degree Mason at this Crestview Lodge, which seems to be linked to this house um, in Crestview, where the Confederate flag still flew on government property until just a few years ago. Um,
Hmm.
so the building of this house, numbered 1118 in Niceville, Florida, for the year the Knights Templar were founded, coincided with the closure of the building of this lodge in Crestview. I believe they took some of their more controversial stuff, so to speak, and literally moved it underground at a off site. They
Hmm.
closed the building. They sold off that property in Mossy Head, which is, I believe, the same property where my kids witnesses lynching, and they later bought a new building. But that all occurred the same time that this house was being constructed under a permit obtained by my ex-father-in-law, Michael Stephen Nobles, while
Yep.
he was awaiting trial for anti-government white supremacist activities in northern Alabama. At the same time, while he's waiting trial, he enters into a partnership and all these corporations with these other Church of Christ leaders with all these occult Knight Templar names. Um, the property that the house was built on was owned by this John Birch Society billionaire crazy guy whose family was tied to the mob and donated the property to build Eglin Air Force Base. An icon of the military, Charles Walter Russell II, who sat on the executive council of the John Birch Society with people like Nelson Bunker Hunt.
Hmm.
You're familiar with that name. So anyway, and then the house is built by this Knight Templar Freemason guy. Nobles doesn't buy or live in the house that he built. So 4 or 5 years later, the first owner occupant was a third party,
Yep.
active duty military. Then years later, Nobles buys the house he built, and the convoluted history continues to this day in that house, but it's obviously unsellable. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there was a drug lab there, an arsenal of
And
weapons.
since you mentioned drug lad, I'm on right on the page.
Yeah,
I'll show these images on the screen so I don't have to
okay,
hold the book up.
sure.
I can edit the video, but so he's got here this it looks like cooking up meth. Looks like
Yeah,
it's cooking up meth in a drug lab, and this is a child showing all the steps that his grandfather was making him do, and his grandfather was Mike Nobles, the guy you were talking about. So that's your father. That was your father-in-law at that time. And so, many pictures, a kid should not know how to do this. And, and then
well,
he's
as you
got
pointed
guilt,
out, it's not just drawings, it's he numbered the steps. Heat, cool,
right?
mix, and so forth. Because my son
Absolutely.
has a photographic memory. He's autistic. He has Asperger's syndrome.
Yeah, so you
And
start small and then it's like mix, pouring it into a bigger cup, stir, heat, cool it, stir again, let it, I don't know what that says, but let it something and then done. So this is basically cooking up meth,
what it
probably.
looks like. So
Yeah, because I think
some
that's,
drug,
I mean,
obviously. Yeah.
that's the kind of drug that needs like a whole lab to go into its
Right.
construction or something like that,
Yeah.
or at
And
least
and he also had this high-tech security surveillance system. He had
yeah,
safe
he's
hash
drawing
as far as
guillotines,
yeah,
guillotines. What
and
the?
that was the really weird stuff. A guillotine, an electric
Yep.
chair. Uh, uh,
Yeah, but the demonic seal we talked about. Yeah, and I know I saw that right away because I have all these books on that stuff, and um, like I was like, oh, that looks like one of those demon seals that Crowley was into,
yep.
or the Solomonic thing, and
Mhm.
I have this dictionary of demons thing, and
One
and
of these corporations, by the way, was Solomon Builders. Uh,
right, right,
so
yeah, Bell, that's the one, and you're like, oh, I don't know what symbol that is to this day, and I was like, oh, that's Baal, and I showed you, and I
yeah,
was like, wow, yeah. Did you show your son the actual Baal symbol
I
and ask
haven't.
him?
No,
No? Okay.
no,
Right. But yeah, this is just a lot of, and it's stuff that is like real, like Ouroboros. That's something that's real. That
right.
a child wouldn't really know about that yet, you know?
No, I'm 7 years old who's been lived a very sheltered life, gone to private schools.
Yep.
He watched Veggie Tales and Disney and stuff. Never exposed to
What really shocks me is this medieval Iraq where stretching people.
yeah,
Like,
but
you
I've
wonder,
found
are they really
references.
doing that to? You think they were really doing that to people, huh?
You know, I've
I
gone
mean,
back and forth.
he
Yeah,
saw him
he
murder
did.
somebody in his kitchen. So it's like, well, if he
The,
does
the,
that, like it's nonchalant, you know what I mean?
this I found historical references to this type of stuff being used in Masonic hazing rituals for near-death experiences. At
Okay,
the same time, Gabe is certain he saw people murdered, and including some people put in this electric chair and killed. So,
really?
yeah,
Whoa.
bags over their heads.
I
Uh,
believe that. I believe that's what it happened.
so
Because,
this is almost like a MK Ultra type thing. It seems like
yes,
when
yeah.
the sexual
And you know
abuse
what
and
else?
torture.
For like a lot of people that have been researching this area for a while, there's so much overlap with other stories
Yeah, right,
because you look into stuff like there's plenty of books, but like with the whole this in California, that whole thing about the daycare, but then
right.
actually they said there were underground tunnels, and the
It turns out
press
there
laughed
were.
it off. And
Yeah,
then there were actually tunnels, and it was
right.
and I have pictures in that
Yeah,
book by Alex Constantine, Psychic Dictatorship. He shows the scientists that went down there and found the tunnels.
right. But it's still buried. It's still the official government position is nothing
Yeah.
happened there.
Yeah, because then if you look online, it'll say there's absolutely no evidence any of
Right,
this stuff happened,
right,
even though these guys are finding the tunnels. And yeah, absolutely. It's just the same way with how they kept shutting down your case and just telling you there's
right.
no abuse happening, even when he went on record saying there was abuse, your own child
Can I read
testifying
a
to the abuse.
few excerpts for you here?
Sure.
Now I've got a book, this thick of the treatment records for my kids. This is just a tiny
Mm-hmm.
sampling. This is a PTSD sexual trauma expert, ex-military who treated PTSD victims in the military, testifying. Uh, Post-traumatic stress disorder. Both boys identified their grandfather as sexually offended them. Um, Because of their reports of sexual contact, sexual abuse, one of the boys described that he was made to bleed. The other boy witnessed that. Made to bleed, yes. Anal penetration, sir. Very specific about that. He was also very specific that the grandmother got him a tissue to stop the bleeding. Um, this is some of her notes. Sibling has let's see. Toby reported experienced digital penetration resulted in rectal bleeding. Sibling witness to this reported sexual abuse, penile fondling by preteen aunts. He has on 3 occasions reported that he was threatened by the grandfather that if he told the grandfather would shoot the father, me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Uh, Reported a history of having to take pictures of his sibling being offended, and was unable to complete the behavioral checklist. It was too hard emotionally. Nightmares, stomach aches, difficulty sleeping, agitated, disorganized behaviors. That's my son. Associated with
Mm-hmm.
trauma, result in intense psychological and physiological distress, PTSD. Gabe reported witness to other events at the hand of the grandfather, which he reported being fearful of. She didn't want to put this in her notes, but she was talking about murder. Um, uh, Say if he told his grandfather would shoot the father. He said, if you shoot my dad, I will shoot you back. Identified, he felt his brain getting bigger, trapped, and identified 9 points where fingers held him down, unable to continue further this activity. Displayed significant increase in physiological distress when completing this when he identified content around the grandfather, crucify, and murder. He became withdrawn, clutched his pillow, scratched his body posture, and became tearful. Um, Here's a letter from the school principal where they made a report of abuse that got deflected because my sons were showing signs of sexual abuse at school. Um, Here's a notice of eligibility. The cases were reviewed by the Attorney General's office in Florida, deemed to be crime victims and eligible for crime victims compensation, yet they refused to investigate the crimes that caused the mental injuries. A letter from a therapist, Carlene Schuster. My professional opinion: abuse is being occurring within the grandfather's home. Both boys have shown signs of sexual abuse. Dr. Marianne McCain, PhD. Testing both cases consistent with diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of abuse by the maternal grandfather. Therapist Kelly Beck. Post-traumatic stress disorder, acute sexual and emotional abuse by the maternal grandfather, Mr. Nobles. And it goes on and on. Father
Yeah.
pinched his penis hard enough to cause bleeding and trauma from the fingernails. That's a doctor's report. Uh, uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you had like just mountains of evidence here
yeah,
and
and
evaluations,
one of the other
professional
ones,
evaluations.
this one, he relayed that he's seen pictures where the grandfather is touching his mother's privates. He was
Yeah.
showing pictures of his own mother. The kids were showing pictures of their own mother being molested as a child. Apparently to convince them that it was okay.
Yeah.
Grandfather
Yeah.
has been reported for abuse close to 20 times, but there's not truly been an investigation, which leads to the question, why? Why no investigation? Why a refusal to investigate?
And
Arrogant, smug, defiant refusal by people like Steve Herm, the former sheriff's department attorney who was rewarded for obstructing justice in a related firearms case with a position as the licensing director for the firearms of all things for the Florida Department of Agriculture. Everybody
hmm,
covered Mike Noble's tracks got
yes,
a political payoff. There was
that's
LaShawn
crazy.
Riggins, the DA who refused to prosecute the firearms case. Uh,
And what about
allow,
Joey? Talk about
oh yeah,
Joey.
Joey Forgione. Yeah, we'll get to Forgione here.
Yeah.
Higgins offered this man pretrial intervention, who was not eligible under Florida law for pretrial intervention. Let him threaten to murder the witnesses in the case. Let him publicly announce he was moving to South America while he was waiting trial, um, and then abruptly dropped the case. She's now a judge in Tallahassee, and she's unfit to be a judge for that conduct. But it goes on and on. They refused to investigate this arsenal of weapons he had. I forced
Yeah.
her and I raised hell, complained to the governor's office. So they arrest him and leap into action to start to fabricate evidence.
Hmm.
The sheriff bails him out of jail. The sheriff signed an appearance bond for him. Um, he has a first appearance where a judge sets $5,000 bond. Well, that's not good enough. So let's bring in another judge who released him on his own recognizance. So we saw two judges in the same day. If that's not corruption, I don't know what is. But
Yeah.
everything is like that. This ended up, by the way, for those who haven't seen the other interviews, with my
Yeah.
career after 7 failed plots to frame me in Florida.
Hmm.
Efforts to wrestle my kids from me and force them into the hands of a monster to shut them up and everything. They went after my career, and I ended up having my career as a pilot sabotaged through criminal fraud by big shots in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Blatant crimes, absolutely
Yeah.
blatant crimes. And
Yeah.
that's
Just it's
only,
like I call it brazen. It's
yeah, yeah.
just
And I ended up getting ganged up on in court by Stuart F. Dellery, who went on to become the chief White House counsel for Joe Biden, Sally Quillian Yates, who went on to become the acting attorney general, an army of other line government lawyers, separately
hmm
in a related case. And I'm having to represent myself because I have no money. I can't afford an attorney. No attorney will take
hmm
my case. Separately, I'm ganged up on by six law firms. Six law firms hired by these two doctors, and then two other law firms hired by my company who got their hands dirty doing the dirty work for this creep who had gone after my job while hiding in South America. Um, but here's something new since our last interview. I don't think we got into this.
Yes.
We did, but if we did, we did. I don't recall, but uh, so Nobles, let's see, 3 or 4 days after I emailed the Niceville police, I want to finally make a report of this murder my kids said they witnessed because twice I tried before and I got blocked. Um,
Hmm.
and I got threatened by Niceville police officer Joey Forgione that he'd throw me in jail if I made a report, that he'd go after my job and say I was crazy if I made a report. So anyway, so he goes after my job with his laundry list of lies, and this HR representative, this HR manager, sets in motion this scheme of fraud to sabotage my career. Well, since the book has been published, and I just talked to Chris yesterday via email, we're going to do an updated version of the book and do a reprint because
Awesome.
this particular part is way too important. This
Yeah.
HR manager who's conspiring with this vicious child rapist is a child
Hmm.
rapist himself. I
Yeah.
discovered that after the book was printed. He has since been arrested and held without bond for aggravated sodomy on children under 10 years old. He was producing child pornography. He was coercing children into sex acts with the use of a firearm, just like Nobles was. His victims were foster kids. Nobles was a foster parent.
Oh yeah.
The state of Florida has erased those records. The guy married a minor, okay, in an arranged marriage. He's been a deacon in charge of children's programs. He's been a Christian school board president. He's been a foster parent. He's been a youth group chaperone. I
Hmm.
think we're seeing the picture here. We're seeing the pattern here. Uh,
Yeah.
and and that's what all these people do. They get in positions to access kids, and then they use their religion and their charities or whatever they're associated with to
It's
hide what
almost
they're
like
really
that
doing. So,
almost like that double-headed eagle that they use.
yeah,
The two
yeah,
face, two faces, like you've got you put on the outside, you put the face of good, like you're a saint. When you're
right.
at the other side, it's like a demon.
Well, that's you hit the nail on the head. This is all about dark and light.
Yeah.
This duplicity of God that they believe in, and they
Yeah.
they pay homage to both sides.
Yeah.
they worship Lucifer and they worship uh, Adonai at the same time. They think
Mm.
they're parts. They're both gods, right?
To
And
them. Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, this Brimberry guy, he's from a Freemason family. Uh, I had this woman in Oklahoma City who, has religious delusions, believes she saw angels come down from heaven and take her father-in-law to heaven. Well, turns out the father-in-law was a 32 or 33-degree Freemason. I've looked that up.
Yeah.
Uh, she made these comments about her father-in-law in an obituary for another family member who's a 50-year member of the Order of the Eastern Star and a Rainbow Girl. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Here's a email this child rapist Brimberry sent me. Um,
And this is a
I,
guy that went after your job. He was
yeah,
part of this whole
he was the
airlines.
resource.
You were
Yeah,
working
he
for
was
an
the
airliner,
right,
and he was like, they were sending you to all these evaluations, and this
right,
guy was like just running amok and just causing all this
yeah,
chaos, trying to destroy you basically.
right,
And then he turns out to be a child rapist. So just
yeah. And here's what it says. Uh, what I'm inquiring now is if you will submit to an independent evaluation from our flight surgeon. And another correspondence, it actually may be in this one. He refers to him as the company doctor. Well,
hmm.
guess what? The guy that he forced me to go see wasn't the company doctor. He wasn't our flight surgeon. He was a hand-picked uh, Freemason, a member of the Roswell Masonic Lodge, another military veteran with his radical
Hmm.
right wing literature all over his office, John Birch Society crap and so forth, and all this Masonic stuff on his walls, pictures of pyramids and the god Anubis. Um, and then he ended up, when he got caught, he lawyered up with his fellow lodge mate, Clifford Hardwick, another Army veteran. He was an Army veteran and a member of the
Hmm.
Roswell Masonic Lodge. Um, and then behind the curtain in this mess was Dr. Michael Berry, who was the author of this, what they call the Berry scheme, which was reported in the Washington Examiner, the scheme of targeting pilots' medical certifications if they're whistleblowers,
Hmm.
which is exactly what was used in my case in the Berry
Yeah.
scheme. Well, Dr. Berry is the son of Dr. Berry is the former medical director for the Johnson Space Center during the shuttle program. Well, his father was the medical director for NASA during the Apollo days and picked all the astronauts for the Apollo program, who, guess what, were all Freemasons, except for one or two whose fathers were Freemasons. But it's an
Hmm.
all white, all male
Yeah.
Freemason.
He didn't want anyone.
Buzz
And
Aldrin
didn't.
taking his little hidden Freemason patch and his little hidden Freemason flag to the moon and having this secret little communion service on the moon. It's all ridiculous. I grew up; these guys were my heroes. Did you know as a child? In any of these books you've read, or in school, or in movies about the space program? Has anybody ever mentioned that all these guys were Freemasons and they took a Freemason flag to the moon, and that they have their own Freemason lodge in Texas, the Tranquility Lodge, dedicated to the Freemason astronauts? But the public doesn't know that. They think you're crazy if you start talking about it, but it's there. The information's out there. It's not some conspiracy theory. It's a fact.
Hmm.
There's pictures
Yeah.
of Buzz Aldrin with his little Masonic flag, that he took to the
Hmm.
moon. So, I've had these crackpots targeting me everywhere I turn around. They've targeted me at 3 different churches. I've been approached by strangers. I've been physically assaulted. I've had one threaten
Hmm.
to burn my house down. And I had my career sabotaged by these creeps. And speaking of
Yeah.
these creeps, this is how they fixed all the sexual abuse cases. The Emerald Coast Child Advocacy Center, where these, right-wing extremists and Freemasons sat on the board of trustees at the Emerald Coast Child Advocacy Center as heroes for children, and that was the epicenter for fixing these cases. They were feeding the perpetrators information.
Yeah.
My ex-father-in-law, while he was under investigation, on paper at least, they invited him into the Child Advocacy Center to sit down with a therapist who interviewed his victims and who provided him detailed information about his victims' interviews. That's sick.
Oh yeah. That's.
And these were interviews that I found out a year or more after the fact that they concealed from me. And when I tried to talk to the therapist to see what really happened, I got ejected from the building and told I was under investigation.
Hmm.
So,
Every step of the way, that's how it was pretty
yeah,
much for you.
it was with trying to get a restraining order taken care of. The sexual abuse investigations were shut down. My kids were kidnapped in plain sight. Uh, that got shut down. In fact, their therapist made a report that should have required an Amber Alert. Instead, Jennifer Clark, a so-called child protection investigator from the Emerald Coast Child Advocacy Center, tried through 3 separate avenues to bring false charges against me for false reporting. Told my ex-wife to hide the kids and file a false restraining order, and she's
Wow.
denied doing any of that, even though I have all the records proving she did all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it was. Pull out all the stops, kill the messenger, make me the messenger, and that's these are these Goebbels lies. This repeated over and over and over again that we were in a custody battle or we're going through a divorce, and I'm just the crazy guy making all these
Yeah,
false
they tried to make it
accusations.
sound like it was just
Yeah, but there
domestic
was no
disputes
custody.
going on.
But there was no custody battle. Their mother
Yeah,
abandoned the kids. She didn't want the kids.
yeah,
There was no
yeah.
custody. This was concocted by people trying to discredit the kids by
Mm-hmm.
discrediting. And they try to portray me as a crazy guy making all these false allegations. Steve Herm again,
Yeah.
the sheriff's department. Nobody but you, according to our records, nobody but you has made any allegations against Mike Nobles. Except I just read you a few examples. Out of 18 at least reports, at least 14 of those were made by other people,
Hmm.
including a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, a therapist, um,
Yeah.
a school principal and teacher, a law enforcement officer. But that was the big shell game they played, and they got away with it. And
Yeah.
there's no statute of limitation for the crimes that this man committed, but he's still free,
Mm-hmm.
been given
Yeah.
immunity for any and all crimes. And anybody who's helped him has been given immunity for the crimes that they committed. Just as of March, I did a FOIA request. And by the way, we haven't got into it today, but as we've talked about before, there are other related cases. One case in Walton County where the kids disappeared in the middle of the night, and we don't know what happened to those kids. Same pattern, same network of people, Church of Christ leaders, Pentagon official, a follower of Aleister Crowley,
Yeah.
Freemasons.
Yeah.
But so this is the latest. Finally got my response, 8 months late. They have 20 days to respond. It took them, 8 months to respond to what this is regarding the sabotage of my medical certification. This report is signed by Melcher J. Antoinano, the medical director for the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute for the FAA,
Mm-hmm.
and 15 specific requests for documents. He blatantly lied in at least 9 of the responses, just blatantly lied.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those lies constitutes a felony. In at least 3 of the responses, he either lied or his response indicates that records have been destroyed, which would be obstruction of justice because he says no records exist. For example, communication between the Attorney General's office and the FAA regarding my case. Well, the Attorney General blocked my appeal, so obviously there must have been communication. They say they have no records, so either they're lying or they destroyed the records.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost amusing. 4 of these responses, for you to accept them at face value, would require time travel, literally time travel. So,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is quite a story, definitely. And at one point, I was worried that they were going to try. You remember the part where so you got the camper back and where he was transporting a dead body, and you were trying to get that tested
yeah,
for human remains and stuff. And
yeah,
I was worried that they were going to try to frame you for that and try to turn it back on you and say you killed him.
yeah. Well, and there were 9 pieces of dental gold, burnt dental remains, human hair, and this is a utility trailer, and it reacted to luminol. I could not find a law enforcement agency in the country who were willing to examine the evidence. They just refused.
That's crazy.
Carried it into the FBI office. We don't have any jurisdiction. Of course, the FBI lied to me about in the firearms case too. Timothy Card hung me out to dry and let me and my kids be battered with one crime after another.
Yep.
And they lied, said there's a gray area in the law allowing Mike Nobles to have machine guns and all this other nonsense. Same crap from the ATF office. They stonewalled, lied. But the lies, ended up going all the way to Washington, D.C., going from coast to coast.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. It was
the
like
number of agencies and individuals who have lied, and in many of the cases lied in official reports, which constitutes crimes, is staggering. So obviously there was massive, massive influence being exerted from day one, and it's still being exerted as of my FOIA request response, which is a pack of lies. So I lost my medical certification as a pilot from a fake DUI that's kind of reminiscent of the MS-13 tattoos, on the guy's hand, the photoshopped MS. That's
oh
what
yeah, I think
that's
I
what this
saw.
country's come down to. I mean, what
I
who in government can you trust anymore? I mean, it
yeah,
doesn't
no,
matter
I
Democrat
know.
or Republican, because this was
I
a
saw I
right-wing.
saw that too.
Yeah,
I didn't really know what I'm actually not even really very familiar with the stories. I just haven't been following anything, but I remember seeing something that it's like it was almost like Times New Roman font. Like it was
yeah.
like so.
Right, and they're dark and bold and crisp, and everything else is blurry and curved, because your hand has curved, but they're all two-dimensional,
Did they
and
really try to pass that off as real?
still doing it. The president did that from the White House, tried to pass it off as
What?
real. Yeah,
That's like so blatant.
I know. It's a reporter confronted him on it a few days ago, and the exchange was almost amusing. It's just, but
Oh yeah, I mean, I just that's the first thing I remember when I saw that picture. It's like, are you kidding me? That's not real. Like,
right. But speaking of which, we've I've left out a big part of this, this right-wing Knight Templar cult. Uh,
hmm
the big treasure that they were guarding, they had this gun in a display case accompanied by
Oh
news
yeah, yeah.
articles and so forth that they told my son was, a hero's gun and the
Yeah,
gun that killed the president, the Kennedy
and
assassination rifle.
and I'll show that
Obviously, I
on
can't
this.
prove that was the
Yeah.
real Kennedy assassination rifle. What I can tell you is I know it was a real rifle. I know my son was told that, and
Mm,
that if you look at the intersection of people and organizations that intersect at that house with this man, you're talking about Iran Contra figures, international
yeah.
weapons traffickers, CIA operatives, Santo Trafficante Jr. and the mob, the John Birch
hmm
Society, George Bush.
Yeah.
So certainly very plausible. I think ultimately that link was, all the signs point to that being the motive for the federal cover up in this case. But regardless, Mike Nobles, he was not acting alone. You talked about some of the pictures. Here's one of
Right.
them here.
Yeah.
These kids being sexually assaulted by two men.
Mm,
One's wearing a ski mask, and the
yeah.
other appears to be wearing a law enforcement hat.
Yeah.
But they identified multiple perpetrators. They identified other children being victimized, including Gabe said he saw kids who were very scared. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know where he was when he
hmm
was taken there. Um, this it's Orwellian stuff. It's the stuff,
Yeah.
so-called conspiracy theories, except for it's just true. You literally
Yeah.
have a case here where the government is providing predators victims via
Mm,
foster children. Then the child protection agency who's providing the victims to the predators is being used and weaponized by law enforcement agencies who have the obligation under law to investigate the crimes, but they use the Florida Department of Children and Families as a dumping ground, saying we don't have to investigate because they've already investigated and proven it to be false, even though they never investigated. They just kept shutting
yeah.
down investigations. a big shell, giant shell game. But Child Protection Services weaponized by law enforcement to cover up victims of human trafficking, victims provided by the state, victims erased by the state, because
Mm-hmm.
they have said, "Oh, Nobles wasn't the one who made the complaint to the airline. It was a passenger." Except for I have the documentation that it was Nobles. Oh, Nobles, there's no record he was ever a foster parent. There's no record anybody but you ever has made any allegations against Nobles. There were 2 911 calls from inside his house. The
Yeah.
report's blank. We don't know who made the call. We don't know what happened to them, but Nobles was identified as a suspect.
Yeah.
It's a house of horrors, a house of hell. And
Yeah.
and there are literally missing foster children, and nobody cares. Almost nobody. There's been
Yeah.
some interest in the book that Chris was Millington was Milligan was interested enough to help me get this book done, and I appreciate that. But the callous lack of interest by most of the public or by government officials who would just rather bury this, and
Mm-hmm.
there's the churches. You have a bunch
Yeah.
of Baal worshipers raping kids, and who's
Yeah.
protecting them? As you'll see in my book, one church after another. Leaders
Yeah.
of churches committing crimes, bullying me, harassing me, offering me a carrot and stick, because all this mess is tied to some big time religious leaders. They don't want to undermine the church, so they'd rather sacrifice kids than undermine the church, and that's what.
Yeah.
So.
That's what it comes down to. Wow. I mean, yeah, this was quite a story. And yeah, I will show that gun. I'll have shown it before when we were talking about that gun. And there's all these other weapons and stuff that some of the weapons are military grade that would be
Mhm.
classified, and you had
Right.
a ATF guy confirm that was a called a sentry gun
Right.
and thing. And
And if you look at who handled the cover up of the Kennedy assassination, it was the Dallas police. And
hmm
I've looked all these guys up: the Dallas police chief,
yes,
the Dallas sheriff, the officer who gave Lee Harvey Oswald a black eye at the theater, the officer who
hmm
escorted Lee Harvey Oswald to his death, was shot by Jack Ruby. All these big characters in the Kennedy assassination were all Freemason cops. They were
yep,
all Freemason.
wow, wow,
Of course, LBJ was the Freemason, Texas Freemason president. We had
yeah, and we were trying
J.
to
Edgar
some
Hoover was
books on him.
J. Edgar Hoover was a Freemason. So that was the club of the white elites, and a perfect tool to help cover up the Kennedy assassination. I think it's the missing piece of the puzzle. I think, the Kennedy assassination was a right-wing coup by
hmm
radicals in the military and elsewhere. And that's the same
hmm
network of people who's been targeting me. All these old ex-military right-wing extremists, these old Freemasons, these
hmm
right-wing religious nuts. That's who's been targeting me over the years. That's who
yeah,
conspired to frame me over and over again. Um, so, I think, JFK researchers should look at this. I can't force them. Hopefully they'll get their attention
yeah.
someday.
No, I've been telling a lot of people about this book because it's like it just seems like it's a it's definitely it's one of those crucial books now when you're looking at all this stuff, especially with these Freemason connections, because this is really kind of like the first book that really like, well, I mean, there's other books that, but this is one book that really has a lot of just, it's well backed up, very, very well done, and you're a warrior for getting through all that.
Well,
Wow.
I was just trying to protect my kids. That's it. And then
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
then
it's
I
just
wanted
you're just
justice for
doing
them. Then I
you're
wanted
doing
justice.
what's right. And
Not only were the crimes covered up, they, again, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, they repeatedly tried to put my kids in the hands of the monster who victimized them, so he could victimize them some more. Then they repeatedly, when I say they, I'm talking about the Florida Department of Children and Families, the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department in Florida, repeatedly tried to block my kids from getting mental health services. That's
mm,
how cold and callous they were. Um, So
Yeah, I mean, it was just brazen. Just it was so. It's just crazy for it's like even reading. I mean, I know I've read about corruption for years, but it's like it's just so in your face when you read this one. It's like, wow, I can't believe this kind of stuff can happen.
yeah, no accountability. Michael Gibson, Noble's attorney, conspired to return firearms to his client, knowing he was a
Mm-hmm.
felon. Then he proceeded to falsify records after that to try to cover his tracks. He should have been prosecuted. He should have been disbarred. But the Florida Bar Association rubber stamped it all, saying that he he made sure the guns were not returned to Mike Nobles, but the guns
Mm-hmm.
were returned to Mike Nobles. So the Bar
Mm-hmm.
Association just lied, just like the U.S. Department of Labor saying a passenger made a complaint to the airline saying they saw you drinking before a flight. Well, there's no record that that occurred, and there's no record that the company even ever claimed that. They've said all along it was Mike Nobles who was never a passenger on a flight. But all these agencies, somebody commits a crime, an act of corruption to cover up for Mike Nobles, then the agency that regulates those people covers their tracks. And it happened over and over and over again with one agency after another. This Dr. Harper, you know, felony HIPAA violations, Privacy Act violations, criminal fraud. So Leon Rodriguez, who went on to become the head of USCIS Immigration Services under Biden, I got a letter from him saying that Dr. Harper wasn't bound by HIPAA laws. He's a medical doctor who performed exams, did reports, transmitted them electronically. He's bound by HIPAA laws.
Mm-hmm.
The FAA guide for medical examiners says he's bound by HIPAA laws, but
Yeah.
Rodriguez says he wasn't. So again, just one of many examples of one agency after another lying, covering the tracks of somebody
Yeah.
who was covering the tracks of Mike Nobles, but ultimately it was about the network of people he was involved with. It was about the
Right.
human trafficking of children, guns, drugs, this trophy in this bizarre freak show site, this underground Knight Templar temple. Uh, X marks the spot, uh, legitimate X marks the spot story because it's numbered for the year the Knights Templar were founded.
Yeah.
Um, and
And your son even saw one of the cops transporting the dead body
yeah,
with nobles.
right. And he testified, houses of the holy.net. I've built a website to support the book. You can see
Okay, good. Yeah.
testimony because they locked me up, tried to frame me for false reporting because we found this tree. It was a tree that triggered my arrest, finding the
Yeah.
tree. They forced my kids to testify against me. What they testify that their grandfather threatened to crucify him, that he had an arsenal of weapons. They found a pistol in the house and fired it and broke a picture on the wall, and that their grandfather committed murder. And then, Gabe dropped this bombshell that there was a bad guy dressed up like a police officer there. Well, guess what? It wasn't a Halloween outfit. He was a police officer. I'm
Yeah.
90% certain of who that police officer was because he decided to describe him as having, gray hair and a mustache, and the case advocate for child abuse cases at the Emerald Coast Child Advocacy Center, who was everywhere interfering with cases involving Mike Nobles and fixing cases. He has white hair and a mustache.
Yeah.
And he's also ex-military policeman, just like so many others in this story.
Yeah.
Robert Morris of the Sheriff's Department, ex-OSI agent. I had an ex-OSI agent living in my house, I believe, looking back under false pretenses, just to keep tabs on me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I talked about the judge who fixed the firearms case. She was an ex-military JAG. This Jennifer Clark, woman who was handpicked to fix the cases for the Department of Children and Families. She was a military wife. Her husband was in military special operations. Um, uh, these doctors that sabotaged my career, old ex-military doctors. So this was a right-wing military cult, I believe. So
Yeah. This was, it's just, what a story. It was so, it was a good read, but damn, like, can't believe this stuff happens. Um, but yeah. And so you've got so what are you doing now? You have your website, right? You have a website going.
Yeah, we're gonna do I think it looks like we're gonna do a reprint of the book, um, and incorporating the stuff that a couple of big things like this guy James Brimberry, who by the way was rewarded by Delta Airlines after this, with a position at Delta, along with the chief pilot who authorized all this nonsense in my airline, Brad Sheehan. Sheehan's still vice president of flight operations at Delta. Uh, Anyhow, this part about Brimberry and him being a predator too, and these two predators conspiring together to target my career, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
an important piece of the puzzle that I'd like to see in the book. Uh,
Yeah.
I also just yesterday hired a narrator to do an audio book. So we have the
Nice.
book in the paperback. There's going to be an audio book out. It's probably going to take us a month or so to get it done. So
Yeah. That's great. Well,
the
do you
podcast
want to
too
wrap
has
it up now,
podcasts.
or do you want to, is there anything
Yeah,
else you
sure.
want to
No,
cover?
an hour's a good point, I think.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, it's always it's easier people, but yeah, this was a this was an amazing book. It's I'm glad that you made it this far because you could have easily been killed along the way because these people do not play. And
and I think when they locked me up in a holding cell for 6 days in 2010, while they were
mm,
plotting to frame me in another county, while officials were sabotaging my career through criminal fraud, they tried to label me crazy again, held me to
mm,
a psychological evaluation, ended up having about six in total and have passed all of them
mm,
with five going. But I think Joey Forgione, this mobster cop, who wrote the report, I think there was a plan to kill me in jail, stage a suicide, and then somehow somebody got cold feet, they got their wires crossed or something. I'll never
mm.
know for sure, but it just looks too bad. They're pulling out all the stops to bury me, and suddenly they
Yeah,
locked me up and labeled me crazy. Certainly looked like they were setting the groundwork to kill me and say, the crazy guy killed himself. So
yeah. Well, and any other time you want to meet again and go over new developments or whatever, feel free, reach
great.
out. We can do that. But Mark,
Appreciate it. Thank
thank
you.
you for coming on here. I'm glad we got this interview going and we went a little deeper into this. And
Yep. Always a pleasure.
yeah, we'll take it from there.
All right.
Everybody, uh, onwards to a better future, like Chris says.
That's right.
All right.